Okay, so basically for this meeting, what we want to do is take the time that we have to just show you guys some of the data from our survey. So for each of the 4 different types of questions we had, rigor, relevance, relationship, and shared responsibility, we identified a couple strengths and a couple sort of gaps or concerns that we found in the data, and we have those on each of the tables. And so what we want to do is split you up into 5 groups, and we're going to do a chalk talk, which is basically just silent dialogue. So at your groups, you'll be at your tables, and there's markers, and you can write comments, and then respond to other people's comments, or write down anything that you think or feel when you see the data. And so you'll just sort of silently discuss with each other on the paper. You'll have about 4 minutes at each of the tables, and then you'll rotate. When we get back at the end, you'll get back to your original discussion, and you're going to brainstorm some themes that you see from after everyone's been to them, what they were talking about, what they said, things that you found that were interesting, and is there anything else they want to?
Possible actions.
Oh, like possible things, possible actions to where do you think we should go from there, from what you see on the paper. So if we could just do sort of row by row, counting off by 5. 1, 2,
3,
4, 5,
1,
2. So if we could have 1s here, 2s here, 3s, 4s, and 5s. There's numbers on the top. 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5.
The next step was analyzing themes from the chalk talks and brainstorming potential actions.
This really relates to you, or this is how it relates to your future if you want to do that specific thing. So kind of showing how, in context of what you're teaching in the classroom, is going to relate if you want to do a certain profession. Even that.
So connect more to class to talk about the extension.
Kind of giving context.
And I also think it depends on which level. Yes, I mean, 9th grade, maybe too early yet.
Good question. I personally think that it's important even in ninth grade to have that clear, because it's very easy, for me at least, in 9th grade to get disconnected, not see what the context of what I was doing, how it related.
Which means kids are saying, why am I learning this? Why do I need to learn this? There's no reason for me to learn this. I have no use for this. And you hear that over and over and over. Kids say that.
Not only are students and teachers in agreement, but our classes build on what we learn.
You're right. That's huge.
Yeah, I think that's great. Because as Ms. Young was saying, a about kind of learning those independent skills through middle school, and if those things that we learn go up with us throughout the years, then that leads to better learning. So I think that's something that we can start with as a foothold for our variation. That ability.
Both teachers and students.
Yeah, I love that both of those are, that students and teachers are in agreement so closely, and it's so high.
So that's something that we can work with to close the discipline.
Next, each group shared their themes and their actions.
Only half, one of the things is that only half kids feel like teachers talk to them about their future. That was a very recurring theme. And 83% feel like they can talk to at least one adult, which we as a group thought was positive. It was generally positive data.
Okay, and some of the actions then that people made suggestions about were to be more conscious about linking content and independent learning skills to kids' futures in order to kind of provide a context and hopefully being more communicative about why we teach what we teach and why they need to learn what we're offering. To reinforce the idea that teachers are willing to talk to students personally. Sometimes we may think that that's more obvious than it is. Maybe it isn't obvious to everybody. People mentioned advisories. And then there was more talk about, rather than advisory groups, more like teachers functioning more specifically as mentors for individual students, just sort of as being available, maybe for the same students through all their 4 years of high school.
So some of the themes we talked about, the whole thing is about the students wanting more involvement in what they learn. And so one of the first things that came up was how much responsibility should be placed in a student's hands to what they learn, because the teachers obviously want to have, like, they want to take something away from all the work that they put into becoming a teacher. Like, they were educated to become a teacher, that's got to show for something, so they obviously should have a say in the matter. We also talked about how teachers, that it's not just like plain and simple, a teacher teaches what they choose to. They're bound by the standards and curriculum. And so what the challenge is how to meld that with the student's wants to work, like what the student wants to learn in with the standards that have to be covered.
One thing that we think is necessary is that we widen the audience here, that parents, potential employers be involved and be able to give some input here. Another is that we increase the dialogue, and that's mentioned in all of these. It seems to be a theme across the board, that we have more student-teacher dialogue on relevance of curriculum and standards, that perhaps we just aren't explaining enough why what we are learning in class is important and how it relates to their real-world experiences. And there was also the discussion that at times, perhaps because it's just what they're learning at this particular moment is a piece of a larger picture, it's hard for students to understand that and see where we're going. So there needs to be more clear explanation on our part.
There's a similar perception towards learning independently and how that's an area for concern. And how do we increase the learning independently without interfering with disciplinary action? And we noted that independent learning isn't happening as much as both teachers and students would like.
Yeah, and I think a big theme we had too was we kept coming around to what are the definitions of these things, like independent learning. We thought we knew, and as we got into the discussion, we realized, well, maybe we don't. And if we're a little kind of murky on what that means, and I'm sure the students are as well. One thing came up, well, maybe internet courses are independent learning. But then we thought, well, not really. All that does is allow you to do things at different times of the day. But in terms of how the learning goes, many of them are very structured. You do this, you do this, you do this, and the independence is only in what part of the day you do it. You can go to time. So that's not necessarily what it is. So then we got a little confused. Well, what really is it? So I think before we tackle and come up with actions, we really have to agree upon what these things mean. And
You can go around the circle and everyone say about one sentence, just summarizing the data and how you felt about it and just your reactions to.
I think it's great that we finally looked at some of the good points and some of the areas of interest and really started to discuss them. And I think now that we have done that, we can start working on making it right.
It's just exciting to see this work we've done, and also from the data seeing both teachers and students agreeing on issues and seeing if there is a problem.
I think that what's a really important next step is having common language, because having that common language moves us forward, and I think it's really important that we use the strengths that we identify to kind of as a foothold for this big step that we're about to take. Because once we get this train moving, there's no stopping.
The thing that jumped out at me was the 17 or 19% of kids who feel they can't connect to anybody. So I'm going to try to keep that in mind. I too think the idea of some sort of mentor or some sort of informal assignment is a good idea.
By and large, students and teachers alike were sort of sleepwalking as though the future toward which we're preparing our students is going to look a whole lot like life as we live it now. And I don't want to get all like wacko extremist peak oil on you or anything here, but economically and culturally, the future for which our students are headed, and us with them, because it's not that far away, is going to look a whole lot than what we're living now. And if I can borrow an idea from Wayne Gretzky, it says skate toward where the puck is going and not toward where it's been. I feel like our teacher perception of real world problems and curriculum oriented toward it is all about where the puck is or has been. Student perception of the same is more like even less informed because they haven't really been out there playing hockey as long as we have. But where it's headed, I think, has barely even entered the conversation in a realistic way. We seem to.
So I'm really going to advocate that we recreate again advisory program in 8th grade. And I think that's when we can start the dialogue and then continue in high school. So advisory program in 8th grade, definitely.
I think change, and certainly change in schools, takes place very slowly. And today's work, in my mind, it has value if it shifts our thinking at all, in a way that's going to support learning and better communication. So I think we just need to have patience and commitment, and shared responsibility and continued dialogue.
So what I really like about all this is that it's been student-driven. The fact that you all are kind of putting this together and working with us instead of us coming up with something and then trying to fit you in later. And I really want to encourage you all to continue with that and keep in mind it is slow, so don't get frustrated, and try to pull other kids in as well would be great.
I like that today it was so clear that everything that we're talking about, we already were role modeled today. I mean, the leadership that you guys took in doing this whole thing is really great, and the dialogue that we had today is really the example of what we want to have, and it was very cooperative, respectful, relaxed, and I liked it.